Greetings and salutations, everyone. This is Volts for June 6, 2025. A journey from clean energy wonkery to influencer fame. I'm your host, David Roberts. A wonk with an advanced degree in policy, working for a clean energy think tank, is a familiar character to Volts listeners. A wonk with an advanced degree in policy working for a clean energy think tank, who then goes on to feature on a reality TV dating show wherein she meets a man who falls for her and proposes to her without ever having laid eyes on her, and she says yes, and they go on to get married, becoming a popular influencer couple, is, I'm guessing, a much less familiar character to Volts listeners. Yet, that is the experience of Taylor Krause, who went from hydrogen policy work at RMI to the show Love is Blind, in what sounds like a modern fairy tale, but is, as millions of people apparently knew well before me, very real. I heard about this, and I thought to myself, what a wild experience. I'd like to talk to her about it. So I did. Enjoy. With no further ado, Taylor Krause, welcome to Volts. Thank you so much for coming.
I'm so excited to be here.
This is very, very exciting for me. It's slightly different, a slightly different thing than I usually do. So I want to kind of take things chronologically.
Sure.
So how'd you end up at RMI?
I ended up at RMI. I was at a multi-client firm called Boundary Stone Partners that specializes in clean energy clientele. And I did my master's capstone in hydrogen. And then RMI just got this really big grant to hire a hydrogen manager. And so I was recruited.
And your degree, you got a master's specifically in hydrogen, like science policy? What does a master's in hydrogen look like?
I went to Johns Hopkins for their energy policy program, which I did at night and then worked full time pretty much as a lobbyist, is the best way to describe my job, and then wanted to specialize in a certain clean energy technology. And I had also worked in the nonprofit sector at Citizens Climate Lobby for about 5 years before that. So I kind of mixed my specialty in federal affairs, clean hydrogen, and nonprofit advocacy working at RMI, which is a think tank. And a think tank is kind of a meta thing, right? So
yes. I'm very familiar with RMI.
I'm sure you've heard from a lot of people at RMI.
Yes. So when did you get bitten by the hydrogen bug? When did that start?
So it's really funny because what happened was a very realistic story of I had to do a capstone for my master's, and I wanted to make sure that I was doing something that wasn't just a long paper that I wrote and then I never looked at again. I think a lot of people in science can attest to that experience. And so I asked my boss at the time what would be a prudent topic area to do my capstone in. And he said, everyone's talking about hydrogen and there's a lot of money going into it, but we have no idea what it is. And so I was like, great. And so that's kind of how I got into the hydrogen topic area. And obviously it was a very, or still is, a pretty exciting clean energy topic. And it's very novel and it's kind of the Wild West compared to a lot of other clean energy technologies out there.
Ongoing wild swings in policy on that score. I just heard that the Republicans are thinking about revoking, which is the hydrogen tax credit, the 45V?
45V, yes.
Yeah. I think they're thinking about revoking that entirely now. We'll see. Here's a question before we get into the other stuff. Do you remain as excited about hydrogen today as you were when you first got into it?
I would say I still remain really excited about the potential for hydrogen. I think everyone that's in the industry has joked that the clean hydrogen economy has been coming for the past like 10
Yes.
years or the past 50
Well,
years.
Really like a century if you go back to the very beginning. It's like Jules Verne or whatever was the first person to describe it.
Yeah, I think that hydrogen as a clean energy technology, whether or not it has a supportive policy environment remains to be seen. But as a technology itself, and in terms of like other companies that I think will survive, it still is an exciting opportunity.
So you were at RMI for several years. This is in the sort of late 20-teens, early 2020s.
Mm-hmm.
And you were young, single, dating, and kind of getting sick of it and getting ready to leave, as I understand it, reading your story. And I'm just curious, like,
Yeah.
as someone who's aged out of that world a long time ago, I'm just sort of curious, like, if you're sort of attracted to, if you go in for the nerdy types, which, sort of spoiler alert, that comes up later. It seems like those types are thick on the ground in DC, and you're young and attractive and gainfully employed. What
the heck?
What's going wrong with modern dating? I'm just sort of curious. Like, what's off with the vibe? Why were you so dissatisfied?
DC in particular, because the show is based in different cities. Every city has a limiting reagent, and I do feel like, sorry, that's my chemistry background coming out. DC as a city, most people that move to DC want to change the world, or like had that kind of, internal story at some point. I know I did. And so not trying to stick this against anyone, but I think that lends itself to like a kind of personality type, and the demographic of DC doesn't lend itself to like the best numbers. But I think moreover, it's a transient city, and you're working a lot. I think there's a lot of your personality is tied up in how much you work.
Yeah, the culture of work there is crazy.
So there's a couple like factors of confluence at play where it's like maybe there are like a good pool of guys, but maybe I just wasn't meeting them because I was, working, or they were working and traveling, or we were, just like not in the same space to meet each other.
Yeah. So then you're thinking about leaving, and this crazy idea comes across your radar. How did it come across your radar for the first time? Was this something that you thought of, or did this something that someone else came to you?
Well, so they recruit heavy in the city that they're going to, that I think anyone in the ages of like 23 to like 40 they know that this is happening. And so by like the fourth or fifth friend that brought me that, they're like, there's applications for this, you should apply. I was like, I don't know if I should be offended that you guys think that I should date blind.
Well, let's back up a little bit. This is just to talk about what we're talking about here. So this is the show Love is Blind. It's a reality show. I'm going to proceed as if my audience is full of people like me who don't know much about anything about this. So pardon if I ask a lot of dumb, naive questions about it. So this show, Love is Blind, the premise is they get a group of guys and a group of women, and they go on quote unquote dates where they're talking with one another, but they never see one another. Basically, that's the premise. Mm-hmm. And they were doing it in DC. They were doing a DC season in 2023?
Yes. I didn't think about that.
And so a bunch of people said you should apply.
Yeah, and shot my shot.
And so what is that? Do you like film a little thing, like audition? What is it?
Oh my God, I hope that they never release whatever audition tape that was. I filled out a very long, comprehensive questionnaire, and I was like, oh my God, this took me 2 hours. And you basically submit all the things that you're looking for in a life partner and your interests, and you do a personality test, and you submit pictures of like people you've dated, so they make sure that like there's people that aren't sorry out there, like that you don't end up meeting someone else on it. So it is a very comprehensive like thing. It's not like a Google form where you fill out 10 things and whatever. Like they are trying to find like regular but impressive people to meet other regular but impressive people that like align a lot more on these like internal personality, like life goal things, rather than like the physical things that you know kind of cloud, I think, are our modern dating.
So you fill all this out and then they call you and say, "Hey, you're on?"
No, they kind of do. They flirt with you for like months. It makes sense because you're also at the same time going through background checks. You're going
Yeah,
through,
I wondered how much of that stuff they do. Do they do like a psych?
they do a psych eval.
Because it's a high pressure situation, you know?
Yeah, it's not for like someone that is probably in a fragile state. Definitely not. And they're also looking to make sure that you have more than one compatible person on the other side, but they're only picking 15 men, 15 women. So that lends itself to like playing, I think, quite a bit of Tetris, where like until the day before you go on set, you don't know if you're going to be in that group of people. You also had to take off time from work, and like in DC, that's not,
Yeah.
that's why I think a lot of people were actually kind of like annoyed that the demographic of people were mostly folks in the private sector or like nonprofit sector rather than like, the special assistant of blah, blah, blah. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, I don't know, like a lot of offices would allow that to happen.
Take a few weeks off for a dating show. I don't know if the government has policies for that. So when it is confirmed that you're doing this thing, by that point, had you worked yourself up into being excited about it and really wanting to do it? Or were you more scared having been through some of the early, you know what I mean? Like at that point, were you just like fully committed?
I think I was just open to it happening, and I didn't really want to get my hopes up, and I didn't really think that I would get picked. I just kind of was like, my name's in the hat. If this doesn't work out, I'm actually moving, like I'm out of DC, I'm moving back to San Diego, and had like kind of one foot out of the city. So I was just ready for the next chapter. And then when it ended up getting the green light, I was like, okay, let's do this thing.
Is this the type of thing where they take you all and you go out to some remote location and you're sort of like quarantined there for a set period of time? You can't call out, that kind of thing?
Correct. You are treated very well. Obviously, there's this demanding schedule, and you don't have a cell phone, which I loved.
How long was the sort of quarantine?
3 weeks.
3 weeks? Oh, faster than...
But the whole process is 6 weeks. So halfway through, depending if you're still like in the show, like you will, because obviously if you don't make it, for those that don't know, you basically, for the first 10 days, you're in what are called pods, where you are talking to a viable like mate. I'm so scientific about this. You're dating through a wall, and you get engaged or you don't get engaged, or you decide that the process isn't for you, and you could leave or you continue on, and then you go on to a trip. We went to Mexico, which is basically like your honeymoon, where like you get to spend time with this person on vacation, which lends itself to like, a very romantic, whimsical kind of experience. And then you come back to what we call the real world, which was basically apartments that you and your person like cohabitate. Ours were in Ballston, so it wasn't actually like in DC, but maybe that was more economical. And then you continue on meeting like friends and family, and then you're planning a wedding at the same time, which is nuts to say now. But it ended up working out like obviously super well for my husband and I.
Yeah. What a crazy thing. Like, did you think going in, I literally might like come out of this married? Did that seem like a realistic possibility to you going in?
I went in to like be perfectly honest, and I've said this across the board, like I went in thinking, I was like, I'm going to learn a lot about myself in this experience. And like, I'm probably going to have a more open mind about dating and find my person because of the things I learned in this experience. I did not think that Netflix would go through thousands of men to find a compatible, great guy for me. I was like, there's a 1%, 0.01% chance that this is going to work out for me. But there were girls that went in, they had wedding dresses on hold. They and I was like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? But luckily, my husband said no to the experience twice.
Oh, they tried to recruit him too?
Well, they don't have a problem recruiting women. They have a difficulty getting guys to do it. So I feel very confident that like they were recruiting him for me.
Oh, like they wanted to be sure that someone in that pool was fit for you on paper, basically.
Yes, basically.
And I'm sort of curious, like, you studied science in school and sort of sciencey minded. People who love science tend to be sort of, rational, left-brained types. And you're thrust into a situation where you're making a lot of sort of instinctual, rapid judgments, and B, just also like emotionally very heightened, intense situations. Did you expect the level of sort of emotional involvement? Did it end up being more intense than you expected? Like, I wouldn't have any idea what to expect going in. So I don't know, like,
It was very emotionally intense. And obviously, I didn't think that I would get as far as I did. I honestly thought I'd go do this crazy thing for a couple of days and then like be done. But it really did challenge you to sit with yourself and trust yourself, because I feel like when we are dating, it's not just a solo choice a lot of the time. Like
yeah.
you are depending upon what your friends think, what your family thinks, what, unfortunately for this generation of like, what's their social media like, or things like that, that like shouldn't matter, but
Yeah.
they play a factor into it. And so for me, it was highly emotional and it was really fast. And like, to your point of being a more rational, scientifically logical person, like you're like, I'm feeling all of these things, but like, this just is nuts. Like this does not make sense, but they do they do structure it in a way that like you are asking all these questions and getting to know this person in a way that like accelerates the timeline of how you would have met them in the real world, where you're talking about finances and kids and where to live.
Do they tell you what to talk about? Are these how structured are these pod conversations?
You are not told what to talk about at all, but they do give you a structure of like, today's theme is this. You can go in and talk about your favorite like amusement parks all day if you rather like do that and not take it seriously, but you'll probably be asked to leave if you aren't taking it seriously and you're not getting to know the person, and that's kind of a recipe for disaster. But you are given some structure and you can kind of follow it the way that you want to follow it. And yeah, we have these journals that they provide like those questions and certain topics to touch on that we have in, and you'll see in the show, and it has our name on it and stuff. And yeah, so there is some guidance, but there is no prescriptive rules.
So it's like today's theme is whatever, family or
religion,
finances, religion. Yeah. You can see how that could strip away a lot of the extraneous stuff and get really intense really quickly. So you meet this guy, quote unquote, Garrett, who I'm curious, like on normal reality shows, there's some sort of process whereby people get eliminated, voted off the show, some council, something rejected, something. How do people get booted off Love is Blind? Is there some sort of vote? Is this something the producers decide?
Ooh, they should add that. That would make it. I'm just kidding. It's just the way that you're matched with each other. So on day one, you go on 15 dates because there's 15 other people on the other side. And then it's kind of like fraternity, sorority recruitment where you rank each other. And then they have an algorithm. My husband is a quantum physicist. And so he was like, I need to know the algorithm, which is so funny. We met with the creator of the show afterward, and he's like, the way that you guys would ask similar questions each day when I would talk to you guys and tell you what was going to go on for the day was just, you guys are both like type A, and clearly
yes.
Science people so funny. But
how does this work?
And if you don't have a viable match, which kind of becomes clear, the people start to break up and they don't continue on. And so as less people are there, stakes and emotions get higher because you are living with the other people that you are supposedly dating the person that you'd like to marry. So
does it come up a situation where like two of the women are after the same guy or vice versa? Or does everybody sort of pair off pretty early?
No, there's some triangles that happen and it makes great television. I was not in a triangle,
Oh,
so
lucky
I got very lucky.
So you start talking to Garrett. You guys hit it off. You both have a science background. When did you get to see him? Like, how does that process? You sort of checked his box, and then what happens?
Then they basically have you guys do what's called a reveal. So you actually get engaged not seeing each other.
So you said yes to marrying Garrett
I said yes.
without ever having laid eyes on him, and vice versa.
Yes, I don't recommend doing that, but
It is very crazy to me.
it's not sensical whatsoever. I do believe that I went into some metaverse, and kept calling it the simulation, because I mean, when you're going through it, I also had just a lot of these weird, I'm not a woo-woo person. I can't even tell you what my like astrology sign is, but there's different, I don't know, different moments of when I felt like the universe in a lot of ways was telling me that this was something to keep going for. And there wasn't a reason to say no other than like the logistical, logical like situation. But after 9 days of talking through a wall, you see your fiance for the first time, which is a overstimulating experience.
I bet. Good God, especially on camera. Like,
Oh yeah, there's like 70 cameras watching you have this super awkward encounter, and like your first kiss, and is he taller than me, or like do I smell good? Like just certain things that I think awkward is actually really honest.
how could that conceivably not be awkward? I can't imagine that not being awkward for any human being.
I think if it's not awkward, it might be a little dishonest, to be perfectly honest. Like you might
Right.
just be continuing on to like be on television, which like I don't knock that against anyone. Like it's an experience that like does not lend itself to always being a successful outcome. And there are it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and like how you wanted to spend it just really depends on the person.
So I'm curious, is it built into the show that the marriage proposal thing, like he couldn't just say, I like you, let's date more. Like what's required by the show?
Yeah, it's no requirement. There's plenty of people that say that this isn't for me. And I think we should just meet in the real world. Like that happens pretty much every season.
So a marriage proposal is not like routine or built in, then
No, it's routine. It's part of the process. Like all the couples that continue on to the honeymoon and through the show, sometimes some people don't get engaged. They kind of just come back because there's those love triangles that happen. But for the most part, the people that continue on through the experiment is how it's referred to, are required to get engaged. I don't know if I don't think they've ever had anyone that's continued in a way that they haven't been engaged, but I could be wrong.
And so then the wedding and all that, is all that also on camera followed part of the show?
Yep.
And it's all wrapped up in the one season? Like if I went and watched this whole season, I would see that whole arc from you meeting to getting married at the end?
Yeah. You'd go to my wedding.
Well, I'm curious, since you're not allowed to call out or communicate with the outside world while this is going on, you kind of disappear into this black hole and pop out with a husband. What did your parents think? What did your friends think? I mean, your friends must have been like, "I told you so." Like they must have.
I mean, they kind of know that if they don't hear from me by a certain amount of time, I got engaged.
Oh, right.
And so all of my friends, I think after they met Garrett, they were just like, oh, wow, yeah, this person's very compatible for you. I get why. This is still really insane. Like we trust you. We think you, of all of our friends, like you would be the person that we would trust to do this and like have a good head on their shoulders about it. And I was like, I mean, okay. But my parents, my dad was not cool with it at first. He kind of freaked out.
Are your parents immigrants?
My mom is from Hong Kong.
So this whole thing must have just been like Mars to her.
You know, Fong is she's very chill, and she's been in the States since she was really young. And so she's very Americanized and very open-minded. And she kind of basically got my dad on board, which was interesting because now they love Garrett and they think it's a wonderful blessing and a cool story and very supportive now. But obviously when it was happening, they're just like, absolutely not. Like, what are you doing? Like, we thought like you were going to go on, do this thing and it would be fun. And now, no, this has gone too far.
Well, you present them with this handsome outdoorsman, quantum physicist, what are they going to do? What are they going to say?
They're like, they don't care. They were like, no, no, no. I think it's also, it speaks back to what building relationships, especially a marriage, can be to some families and like how participatory you are in something like a wedding. It really deconstructed the meaning of a lot of different things, which I really appreciated about the experience. Like a wedding is about the two people that are getting married, and it should be, we eventually would like to do a bigger one, like ceremoniously, like to bring our families together.
Did you do like a runoff elope by yourself kind of thing?
No, we did a bit on the show. At the end, they basically have the people who make it to the final stages. You've been planning your wedding this entire time, which Netflix completely pays for and puts on.
Nice.
And was a beautiful, wonderful event for us. And there's some couples that go and one person says no, both people say no. So they pent it up where you show up to the altar and it's if you're saying yes or no. But Garrett and I knew that I was like, I'm not getting in a dress in front of my family. Like if I'm saying no or you're saying no. So
what a crazy thing. So you haven't had a chance then to sort of like do the big family quasi, because my wife and I kind of did the same thing. We got married on one coast and a bunch of our family couldn't make it. So we just got married again a week later on the other coast. So
you're on to something.
Everybody else could come.
Yeah. We did our wedding here in Virginia, which was really fun. I mean, thinking it was 80-person wedding. It's obviously like all televised and probably the wildest wedding that most people will ever go to. So it was a cool experience.
Yeah, it must be super schmancy, right? With Netflix money behind it.
It was great. I mean, and so we would love to do one back in California when it makes sense. Like we just bought a home in DC and weddings are very expensive. And obviously the show came out about 6 months ago. And so we have kind of just been thrown through a whirlwind, and I've never met anyone that's like planned a wedding and said, wow, this is really easy. So we're waiting.
Well, you have all the time in the world now. You can do it at your leisure now.
Hopefully.
What last question about the mechanics of reality TV, which I've always sort of wondered, like you're not seeing like dailies or whatever. So like, one of the things you hear about reality TV is like they're filming all of you for just like dozens and dozens and dozens of hours. And so once you have all that raw footage, you can edit it together in a number of different ways. And I know that like on reality TV, they need characters, they need drama, they need whatever, so they edit certain people to make them into a character, basically. You hear, and like some people come out of this complaining, some people don't. But I'm just sort of curious, like, did you know how you and Garrett were being portrayed, or did you just find out with everybody else when you saw the finished show? Like, were you completely throwing yourself on the mercy of the producers the whole time?
Yeah. I mean, you basically sign away like all of your like rights to the narrative. For me, I knew that I like the person I am. I know who I am. I'm always going to act, I think, out of integrity. And if I mess up, I will take full accountability. And for myself, I just did my best. And I knew that at the end of it, I sat there for a year because you get married and then you're in hiding for a year. For a year, yeah, it's crazy. That whatever ends up happening, if I get a bad edit, then the people who know and love me know who I am, and that's all that matters. But to your point, like, yeah, you hear these horror stories, like this was edited this way, and they could twist my words and take things out of context. So when it ended up, the show came out, And I was like, oh, okay, that wasn't so bad. Like, that was pretty good.
Maybe not even bad, but did anything sort of strike you about, like, did you feel like watching the show, like, yes, that's recognizably me? You know, like they sort of like got it pretty well right? Or was it just sort of like odd to see yourself? You know, there's a certain sort of out of body experience to all this, like seeing yourself as a character. Like, did the character you were on the show, did that approximate how you think of yourself?
I think, yeah. I mean, I genuinely thought I was going to be considered very boring and that no one would really care about me because you're surrounded by all of these relationships that are going through a roller coaster and drama. And I was like, oh my God, babe, we are so boring. Like, no one's going to care.
Well, honestly, like in the context of reality TV, a normal, psychologically healthy person is a little bit of a novelty. Just like, you know what I mean? Like a person who's just normal, like they do look for dramatic personalities. So like, I can imagine there being a novelty to it. Like, gosh, she's just like a normal, nice person, you know? How odd.
A lot of my friends were like, it felt like hanging out with you. It didn't feel as though we were watching someone on television. It felt you were just being yourself. And I'm glad that came through. You know, the other thing too about the experience that I really learned about myself is that I am a bit more soft-spoken. When you're in the experience, a lot of the way that you have dialogue is by people just talking over each other. And that's just not my vibe at all. And I'm a bit more concise and to the point about certain things, which I just thought that maybe they wanted something more dramatic and ranty and crazy.
If I ended up in a situation like that, I would feel pressured to sort of like be more dramatic, you know, like
be a character.
Be a character, exactly. Like I'm sure that's.
By the end of it, I was just like, or midway through, you really have to just be yourself because there's so much going on. And I was filming at night while working full time and planning a wedding. So, yeah, I don't recommend doing that. But it was a blast. I met my person through it. I learned a lot about myself. I'm glad that I ended up being the fan favorite.
Do you have a good explanation for yourself in your head why you and Garrett ended up being such fan favorites? Is it just because you're like nice, intelligent people and got along and you know what I mean? Like,
it's funny. I was just talking with the Netflix PR team talking about wanting to, doing this podcast. Oh, just a reminder, like I'm doing this podcast. It's probably going to get nerdy. And they're like, we love it. And we need more nerdy people on cast. And I got a lot of feedback from people in STEM fields or policy fields that were so excited to see representation, and from climate people. Like, people don't really know what a climate job is, you know?
Maybe this will be, this is what the reality TV producers of the world will take away from this. We need more nerds. We need more nerds on TV.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the green thing, like this is one of the main questions I wanted to ask you is, you know, you went into a public-minded career. You care about climate, obviously, is why you ended up in the profession you ended up in. And here you are going into this situation where millions of people will be paying attention to you, which, you know, might not ever happen again. No one understands how these things work. You know, it could well be a one-off thing. Did you think consciously going in about trying to convey some sort of like green messages, like trying to work that in? Did you ever talk to the producers? Like, you know, like how nerdy am I allowed to get here? Like how am I allowed to go on and on about climate change? How did you think about, or did you think about how much message to work into all this? Hey there, everybody. Don't worry, I'm not going to tell you about a new mattress or push a credit card on you. This isn't an ad. There are no ads on Volts. It is supported entirely by listeners like you. If you'll indulge me for a second, I'd like to ask for your support. I started Volts because we're all surrounded by depressing news about climate change and misinformation about clean energy, and it's never been more important to share the stories of the real people on the ground doing the real work of transition and all the ingenuity and courage and public spirit they are bringing to it. People are hungry to hear these stories, to learn from and find inspiration in them. I've heard from people who change majors or careers after hearing episodes of Volts. People using it in classrooms, in community groups, even state legislators who have passed bills inspired by specific episodes. Sharing these stories matters. It makes a difference. If you have found value in it and want to help me continue doing it, I hope you will join the community of paid subscribers at volts.wtf. It's about the cost of a cup of coffee a month. If you don't like subscriptions, you can make a one-time contribution, leave a review on Apple or Spotify, or just tell a friend about Volts. I am grateful for any and all support. If you're already a paid subscriber, thank you. And now, back to the show. How did you think about, or did you think about, how much message to work into all this?
Yeah, I don't know if I thought too hard about messaging because it's, again, they have thousands of hours of footage and what they pick and choose is not up to me. But obviously being someone from a clean energy field, I went to school for it. I've done it, like volunteered for it. I've worked in it for almost a decade. It's pretty fundamental to me as a person. So being able to talk about that and convey that to a potential life partner was incredibly important to me. And so I knew that I would be talking about it. And if you didn't believe that climate change was real and we should do something about it, then you're not my person.
Yeah, I guess that came up with Garrett early on. Did you squarely?
It came up all my people early on. I think day one.
Were there any, I'm just so curious, were there any like deniers? Were there any guys who failed that particular test?
No, maybe they're lying to me. I don't know. But I was delighted that every single time I talked about my profession and climate change being important to me, everybody across the board agreed. But there's 15 people, so I don't know if that's a correct sample size.
Did you dare to, I'm always, like one of the sort of recurring jokes on this pod is like people who know a lot about this stuff completely lose their ability to gauge how much other people know. You know what I mean? Like what the background level of knowledge among normal people is. Like, did you ever get all the way into like hydrogen and why it matters? Or was this all just like, it's like climate-y stuff? Or like how geeky did you get?
I got pretty geeky with at least the two, which one is Garrett and then the other person I was dating, because I have a hydrogen tattoo on my wrist and it's the topic that I said 45V more than my own name last year. So it was really important. And
did 45V, like if the words 45V were actually spoken on the final broadcasted show, that would just be like the most thrilling thing for me in all of history.
It did not make it, but hydrogen did. Hydrogen did make it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hydrogen did make it. I mean, my husband probably explained to me what a quantum computer is, and I can't convey that. So that's okay if he can't tell me about how the hydrogen tax credit should be structured.
What does he do? I mean, what is a quantum physicist? Is he in like a lab somewhere?
So he used to be he used to work in a lab, but now he works for a private company that he manages a bunch of technical people and engineers into building a quantum computer.
Interesting. Yeah, I just had the governor of Illinois on a few weeks ago, and he's very excited about quantum computing, although he didn't seem to totally understand what it was either, nor did I when we discussed it. So at some point, maybe I'm going to...
You can have my husband on.
Have Garrett on, and we can figure out what the hell quantum computing is once and for all. So you are now a year out of this, 2 years?
Year and a half.
Year and a half out of this. I guess probably the actual like Love is Blind related hubbub has died down somewhat.
And maybe, I mean, every season, I think that will come out after you do, I think, reflect back on the people that get married and are successful from it. And so that does come up. But yes, my time of the most relevant I will ever be has passed.
Your peak cultural relevance.
I'm good. I did it. I don't know how people that are actually famous do it.
So you are leaving RMI now.
I have left RMI, yes.
You left RMI. What was the thinking behind that? And what are you doing now? Like, what are your plans?
Yes. So at RMI, my job was being on the federal policy team. And so for everyone that doesn't know,
So I almost appended to the question, and how much does Trump have to do with these answers?
I think there was kind of a nexus and a confluence of factors that happened for me where like we had a big election. Obviously, it changed what my day-to-day looked like dramatically.
Yeah.
And for content creation from being on a reality television show, I had I had no idea what the opportunities were from it. I didn't realize that I had this really creative, fun side of me that enjoyed creating content. Like I've always kind of been more of a behind the scenes lobbyist person that's been, generating influence in a different way. And so making more of a salary doing content creation versus working at a nonprofit became very clear very quickly. And I really loved doing it. I mean, I'd love to hear your tips on like content creation, but I'm very new to this space.
I meant to ask, like, before you went on this show, did you ever, prior to that, have any sort of like thoughts or aspirations? Like, I want to become a content creator. I want to become an influencer. I want to be better known. I want more attention. Like, was any of that in your brain before this actual opportunity came up?
No, I thought I'd like go be the director of federal affairs at some hydrogen startup, like genuinely. And so being able to talk about sustainability in a different way, because obviously the federal avenue to do that is very fraught. The opportunity to have an impact in that way very much changed.
It's all grinding, defensive,
Yes.
depressing work for the foreseeable future.
Yes. And so being able to work with other companies and create content about things that I care about and think are impactful or creative or fun, I'm very lucky to have that opportunity. And when I told my colleagues that I think I want to make the transition into doing this full time when the Institute is, and most people working in climate and clean energy are tightening their belts and being very diligent. I was like, I don't want to take space of someone else that I know can give like 200% when I'm interested in maybe making a pivot. So it just kind of became pretty clear after 6 months of under that administration that I wanted to take content creation full time.
Totally understandable instinct there. So, like, now you're an influencer. What does that mean exactly? What is like?
It's a great question.
You have this now attention. You have this fan base. You have this a lot of people who know who you are and care what you think and have developed this parasocial fondness for you through this experience. And you can take that and use that attention for good, is what you're saying. What does that mean, though? Like, concretely, like companies that are selling sustainable goods come to you and you...
Yeah. So to be fully like for me, I'm dependent upon income from different companies that want me to basically put together endorsements for their product. And I'm still in the process of creating what is my brand, because I'm just my brand. And what does that mean? And what is like the clear messaging of that? And like, obviously climate and clean energy was such a core tenet of mine. Being able to promote sustainable things is something that I'm prioritizing. I can't like endorse I don't think I've gotten a deal yet for a hydrogen car or something, which shouldn't be used for like light duty vehicles anyway. But
well, it'd be like a hydrogen reduction steel furnace.
Just everyone should have an electrolyzer in their home.
Sponsored by an electrolyzer company. That's some influencing I'd like to see.
That'd be great if I could pivot into, it's been mostly things that are, for example, Subaru, which is a great, there is the first zero waste automaker, and they're generally just a leader in the conservation space for automakers. That I just did a partnership with them where they're had an Earth Day campaign with the Arbor Day Foundation. And there's, for example, another company that's my favorite, which is Ritual, which is a supplements company that is woman founded. And they basically have done like a full analysis of their scope 1 to 3 emissions and trying to decarbonize their supply chain with actual tangible targets and clear roadmaps, which is much more granular than I think an average influencer probably
Mm.
is getting. And there's other things like a hair care company called Kitsch that reduces plastic by using shampoo bars and different accessories from recycled plastic. So like it's very new to me what sustainability is, and being wary of greenwashing.
Yeah. Do you have help? You're sort of like, you are your own brand, your own company now. You are Taylor Krause Inc. Do you have employees to help you sort of like filter through this stuff? Because I'm sure everyone's coming at you.
I did my due diligence I had a lot of agencies coming at you that they'll bring you different partnerships for a certain amount of money and they take a commission. But the type A person that I am, I interviewed probably a dozen different agencies, and then I took my top two and I had them basically compete against each other for a certain amount of time, and then went with that agency. And so now I'm exclusive with them, that they manage the different partnerships. And I've said that these are the kinds of companies that I am trying to work with. And obviously, most people working at an influencer agency, they don't know what scope 1 to 3 emissions are and things like that. So we work together to do that kind of vetting, but they know where I stand in terms of who I'm trying to partner with. And just because something's labeled eco-friendly doesn't necessarily mean that it's an authentically like sustainable brand. But I think there is kind of this gray area that I'm figuring out in real time of, okay, we're companies that are genuinely trying to do better and the right thing, but maybe they're not like at a true net zero place.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's tricky. And my brand is a lifestyle brand. So it's not necessarily just sustainable, eco-friendly, clean energy, climate things at all. I don't think that that's, for me, necessarily the holistic like part that I want to convey. Like I want to convey that a person can be a multifaceted person and still care about these things and still want to travel and still like want to talk about like their home decor, So.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly think that like, I'll never forget, this might be dating me, but back in like the mid 2000s, NBC had a green week you might remember the first Al Gore wave of sort of green hype.
And everyone got light bulbs. Yes.
Everyone got light bulbs. All the magazines did a green issue. It was the mid 2000s. But I remember like NBC basically told all their producers, put something green on your show this week, with clearly no further guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And so what popped up again and again is a character on the show got obsessed with green stuff, became annoying and naggy about it, irritated everyone else, and then eventually got over it, right? So it's like, I think this has always been part of the public's perception of like, people who care about this stuff only care about this stuff, and they're self-righteous about it, and they're annoying. So
yes, exactly. Thanks for saying that better than I could say it.
I do think there's value in showing that you can be like a normal person, like a normal aspirational person.
Yeah.
And care about this stuff organically.
Thank you. It's been trying to be as authentic as possible and sharing parts of a normal life that are in some ways inspirational to other people, but not in an like oversaturated way is something that I'm really trying to just like figure out. So,
well, this is, Chris Hayes, the MSNBC host, has a book out on attention recently, and I interviewed him about it on the pod. And, it's just all about sort of how attention is sort of like the coin of the realm these days. Everybody's got a million different competing demands for their attention, screens everywhere. And it's also about sort of the kind of mind F that is involved in suddenly getting a lot of attention. All the different ways that it can mess you up.
Yeah.
And, I just sort of wondered, like, how sort of self-aware or how self-conscious are you going into this about the sort of danger of like, it's one thing if you're just like showing people your life, but, the danger is always there of like, am I crossing a line where I'm sort of like performing now? Like,
yeah.
And am I performing all the time? Like, what still is my normal life versus me performing? Just like the psychology of it all is so daunting to me. Like, are you thinking proactively about sort of how to like keep your wits about you, how to keep your sanity about you?
I think I was really lucky to have gone through the experience and sat there for a year.
Yeah, that's so weird. Can you just describe this? You went through it and got married and did all that, and as yet no one knew.
Yeah.
So you had to like basically be in hiding with your new husband for a full year before the show came out?
Yeah. Yeah. We just didn't have a digital footprint, but you could still do like Christmas with like your family somewhere, go to dinner. But when the show came out, you couldn't be out in public together until it was done airing. And I'll just say that like the internet, like just people are the FBI. Like it's crazy.
No kidding. Especially on like reality TV. I mean, there's like everybody's a sleuth about these things now.
Yes. And most people that watch reality TV are women. And I now believe that if women solely ran the CIA, there'd be no crime. No crime in this country.
Did you get sussed out? Did you get exposed? Did someone track you down? And
people, yeah, they went through every nook and cranny. And luckily, I think I'm just a good person that hasn't done anything terrible, that nothing happened. But to your earlier question, like I just was myself, because clearly you're making the biggest decision of your entire life. And so I just showed up as myself with my husband. I would be doing myself a disservice by not doing that. And to him, obviously, as well. But I thought that I would just be conceived as like a very boring person. So when it turned out that like just being myself and being celebrated for, I think, an authentic, kind, genuine person, that's really stuck with me. And I'm lucky that that was my experience, that I'm carrying that forward. And for me, that's the only way that I'm going to be able to do this sustainably. And yeah, no, but to your point, I have not figured out or thought too much about the fear of whenever you put anything out there that people, you probably have this all the time, have opinions, whether you...
Yes. People, I mean, are just, at least they're just judging like my professional work. Once you become a influencer like this, people are judging your life, and there's like millions of them doing it. That's part of what's such a mind screwer about it.
The human brain is not supposed to undergo that much attention.
No.
Let alone, it was very positive for me and it was overwhelming. So having it be a majority negative, like I feel for my colleagues, and I have bad days. I'll get mean messages or things that really, make you question yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like, I think it'd be super weird to not have those moments of really questioning things or not feeling good. I think that's just the human nature, but being able to pick myself back up over those moments and try to be better. I do appreciate when people call me out, especially as I'm learning how to do this. And this is an extension of myself in a lot of ways, that I've gotten a lot better at not taking things as personally and taking it as feedback to get better and increase my influence and impact. Because if I'm not constantly learning and taking feedback from the people that follow me, I don't think I'll be successful at this. So that's what I'm trying to do. Maybe let's circle back in a year to see.
We'll see. How about Garrett? Is he equally enthused about the life of influencing, or is he sort of like along for the ride? Does he still have his day job? What's his disposition towards the influencing game?
So for, I guess, more from a brass tacks perspective, for influencers, women just tend to be able to make a living from it much more easily than guys can.
Huh. I guess if you're a guy influencer, you got to like eat meat and whatever, like pump iron. I don't know what that you got to get into that. You make protein shakes or whatever the hell that all that is.
Yeah. And I mean, even looking at our Instagram, I think, is kind of the most tangible metric for whatever influence means coming from a show. And we went through the same exact experience with the same exact outcome. And I have twice as many followers than he does from it. And so
that's really funny.
For him, I think the opportunities are not the same. So it has to make sense for him too, where like I'm able to, I think, authentically show up and be able to monetize that more than he is. And so we're still doing brand deals together, and we'll be doing maybe different shows in the future together. And like, we'd love to start a podcast or something else together. So I think there's more opportunities. We just have to create them.
Well, I've been told by several people online that I'm supposed to ask you about his glow up. I had to Google what a glow up is, but he's looking quite dapper these days.
Thank you, my little model husband.
Are we? Thank you for that.
No, he genuinely was just a person that lived in Fredericksburg and just did physics and went fishing and didn't really care about how he looked. And so he kind of always has had this like flair for fashion and stuff. And I mean, he had this like haircut that was this military haircut. And I was like, I don't care. Love is blind. I don't care what you look like. But I'm someone that I like to dress up and I like to travel and I'm from DC, which is very different than Fredericksburg. And so I think it gave him the opportunity to do that stuff. Like there was no opportunity to do that before. And so in terms of his glow up, like I just say this, like if a woman went on and like had a, quote unquote glow up and they attributed it to her husband, like people would be raked over the coals. But
yes.
So my husband makes his own choices and I'm very supportive of it.
Well, everyone's pleased with the results. So I think that's the important thing. Well, final question then.
Sure.
You have been catapulted from one life into a very different life. A life now which is sort of lives or dies by attention. And it's sort of kind of a law of the universe that anyone's tumble in that particular barrel is limited, right? Mm-hmm. No one ever knows how limited. You know what I mean? I think particularly these days, the sort of fickle nature of attention, I don't think anybody really has a handle on the whys and hows of it. So have you, I mean, and maybe this is premature since you're just getting your feet under you, but have you thought at all about the lifespan of this life, of the influencer? Do you know what I mean? Like, how long could it last? And are you going to be pushed out of it clinging the whole way? Or have you thought about, like, what is the end state of this? Like, what is a graceful exit from this? What does the lifespan of this look like, start to finish?
So I did think, maybe not to this end of like the way that you're framing the question, but I thought about it obviously like really long and hard before leaving a great job, a great place, like something that I've worked really hard to have a position in, to kind of take this leap into a way more risky career. Career is maybe not the right word, but opportunity. And so I think I understand that I probably have, sorry, there's an ambulance going by, but I think I understand that I have an opportune Overton window of like influence. And I really have the opportunity to make whatever it is that I do into have a following from it that's sustainable, that can maybe materialize into other opportunities for the next year. And so I was kind of like, I'm going to give it as much as I got and do something that I think is fulfilling and interesting and cool. And then if it doesn't work out, I'll hopefully like in the next couple of years, like could come back to a different like environment. But yeah, it's a great question. I know that there's finite time to really make something of it. And so I'm kind of in that window of really giving it a go and making it into something that's successful.
Still is fascinating. I'd love to come back and talk again in a couple of years just to hear like what is the, as you sink into it and learn more about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to
what you find out about it.
I have to read Chris Hayes' book on attention because
well, he doesn't. Spoiler: he doesn't have any great answers to.
Oh, good.
There's not really anything to be done about it. It's just the nature of the world these days. We're all being called upon to deal with levels of attention. Even people, like me, who's like a modest niche podcast, like everybody who's got any kind of online presence is getting more attention than humans are built for. So almost everybody has to deal with it on some level or another.
Well, if it's any consolation, when you reached out, I was over the moon because obviously being a climate and clean energy nerd You're like, oh my God, David Roberts, like, this is crazy.
Oh, well, thank you. Vice versa. Yeah. Let's reconnect in a couple of years and see how things are going.
Okay, I won't disappoint you.
Thank you for listening to Volts. It takes a village to make this podcast work. Shout out especially to my super producer, Kyle McDonald, who makes me and my guests sound smart every week. And it is all supported entirely by listeners like you. So if you value conversations like this, please consider joining our community of paid subscribers at volts.wtf, or leaving a nice review, or telling a friend about Volts, or all three. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.